Bankrupt CEO finds a poor 7-year-old girl cleaning his office, unaware she secretly fixed a 300-meter flaw and saved his company. He changes her life forever. Alexander Preston adjusted his Italian silk tie while staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office. 48 floors below, Manhattan buzzed with morning energy, oblivious to the storm raging inside Pinnacle Enterprises headquarters. At 53, Alexander had built his tech empire from nothing, but today it teetered on the edge of collapse. 300 million, he whispered, his breath fogging the glass. $300 million missing, and nobody can tell me where or how. His phone buzzed, another call from the board, another demand for answers he didn't have. Alexander let it ring, watching his reflection in the window. Silver hair perfectly coiffed, bespoke suit impeccably tailored, eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. The quarterly report was due in 3 days. Without answers, the stock would plummet, investors would flee, 22 years of work would vanish. He'd started in his garage with nothing but student debt and determination. Now he employed over 5,000 people, all depending on him to navigate this crisis. Mr. Preston, his assistant's voice came through the intercom. The financial team is waiting in the conference room. Alexander straightened his shoulders. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. He'd fired his CFO yesterday after discovering the discrepancy. $300 million gone. An accounting error, embezzlement, catastrophic mistake. Nobody knew. The forensic accountants had worked through the night with no answers. His phone buzzed again. Melissa, his ex-wife, probably calling about the alimony he might soon be unable to pay. 5 years divorced, and still she hovered like a vulture. Not now, he muttered, silencing the phone. Alexander grabbed his tablet and strode toward the door, pausing at his desk. A small photograph sat beside his computer, the only personal item in the sterile office. A younger Alexander stood beside his father outside their small Ohio hardware store. Before college, before Silicon Valley, before Pinnacle, before everything fell apart. I won't let it end like this, he promised the photograph. In the hallway, he nearly collided with a cleaning cart. A small figure darted back. Sorry, mister, came a tiny voice. Alexander glanced down to see a child, a little girl with dark pigtails and eyes too serious for her age. She wore the uniform of the building's cleaning company, comically large on her small frame. What are you doing here? He asked, more sharply than intended. This is an executive floor. Where's your supervisor? My mama's cleaning the bathrooms, she replied, her small chin lifting. I'm helping, I'm 7. Alexander checked his watch. Children aren't allowed up here. It's against company policy. The girl nodded solemnly. I know, but Mama couldn't find a sitter today and we need the money. I promise I won't touch anything important. Something in her earnest expression stopped Alexander from calling security. The dark circles under the child's eyes mirrored his own. What's your name? He asked, his tone softening. Lily Washington. Well, Lily Washington, stay out of trouble and stay out of the offices. She nodded seriously. Yes, sir. Sorry to bother you. Alexander continued toward the conference room, dismissing the encounter from his mind. He had 300 million problems to solve. One little girl was the least of his concerns. Behind him, Lily watched him go, then quietly slipped into his empty office. Dawn broke cold over the East Harlem apartment building where Lily Washington lived with her mother, Gloria. While other children her age were still sleeping, Lily was already dressed, carefully pouring cereal for herself and her 5-year-old brother, Marcus. Eat up, buddy, she whispered, not wanting to wake their mother who had finally fallen asleep just 2 hours ago after her night shift at the hospital cafeteria. Their apartment was small, but meticulously clean. 1 bedroom for their mother and a converted dining nook where Lily and Marcus slept on a pull-out sofa. The walls were thin enough that Lily could hear Mr. Guzman's television next door, already blaring the morning news. Marcus rubbed his eyes sleepily. "Is Mama taking us to school today?" Lily shook her head. "Mrs. Rodriguez from 3B will take you. I have to go with Mama to her cleaning job." "Again?" Marcus pouted. "Why can't you come to school?" "Because Mrs. Winters is sick, so Mama has to cover her shift this morning, and you know we can't afford a babysitter." Lily spoke matter-of-factly, with none of the resentment another child might feel. At 7, Lily had already mastered skills many adults struggled with: managing time, solving problems, and keeping secrets. The biggest secret was how often she missed school to help her mother. The school thought Lily had frequent doctor's appointments. In reality, she was working alongside Gloria, quietly and out of sight. Gloria Washington appeared in the doorway, her eyes heavy with fatigue, but her uniform freshly pressed. "Baby, you didn't have to get up so early," she said, kissing the top of Lily's head. "I wanted to help," Lily replied. "I made your coffee. It's in the thermos." Gloria's eyes shimmered. "What did I do to deserve you?" She glanced at her watch and sighed. "We need to leave in 15 minutes. Mrs. Rodriguez will be here for Marcus at 7:30. While her mother showered, Lily packed Marcus's lunch, a peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and the last pudding cup. She tucked a note inside. "Be good today. Love, Lily." Lily loved school and excelled in her classes, especially math. Numbers made sense to her in a way people often didn't. They were reliable, consistent. When her first-grade teacher had discovered Lily could multiply 3-digit numbers in her head, she'd recommended advanced placement. But extra programs meant forms and questions about their home life, so Gloria had politely declined. On the subway ride to Midtown, Lily leaned against her mother's shoulder, watching the numbers of each passing station. She calculated the intervals between stops, the approximate speed based on distance and time, the patterns in the passenger count. "Remember, stay close to me today," Gloria whispered. "This is a fancy place. Very important people work there." Lily nodded. "I'll be invisible. And if anyone asks, I'm helping you because it's a school holiday," Lily finished. "I know, Mama." At Pinnacle Enterprises, they entered through the service entrance. Gloria signed in while Lily stood quietly beside the cleaning cart, eyes downcast as she'd been taught. The security guard barely glanced at them. 48th floor today," he said, handing Gloria a keycard. "Executive offices need special attention. Board meeting tomorrow." On the service elevator, Gloria knelt to Lily's level. "Baby, I need you to be extra careful today. These are the big bosses. If they catch you, I could lose this job." Lily nodded solemnly. "I'll just dust and empty trash cans. Nothing complicated. That's my girl." Gloria straightened her uniform. "Let's split up to finish faster. You take the east hallway, I'll take west. Meet back here in 1 hour." As the elevator doors opened, Lily felt a familiar thrill of adventure. While other kids played pretend spies, she was a real one, invisible, observant, and on a mission to help her family survive. She had no idea that today's mission would change everything. Alexander sat alone in the darkened conference room, illuminated only by the glow of his laptop. The financial team had left hours ago, defeated. The board meeting loomed tomorrow morning, and he still had no answers about the missing 300 million. His temples throbbed. The forensic accounting team had traced the discrepancy to a complex series of international transactions involving their new semiconductor division, but the trail went cold at a Singapore holding company. It wasn't embezzlement, at least not the obvious kind. It appeared to be a catastrophic algorithm error in their automated trading system, compounded by human oversight failures. The phone rang. His new interim CFO, Patricia Winters. "Please tell me you've found something," Alexander said, bypassing any greeting. "Nothing definitive. Patricia replied, her voice tight with tension. But I've been reviewing the original code for the trading algorithm. There's something odd in the execution parameters. Odd how? She hesitated. It's difficult to explain without getting technical. But I think there might be a recursive error in how the system processes multi-currency transactions. Alexander pinched the bridge of his nose. Can it be fixed? Theoretically, but finding the exact error could take weeks. We have hours. After hanging up, Alexander stared at the spreadsheets until the numbers blurred. Outside, the cleaning staff moved quietly through the halls. He'd been so absorbed he hadn't noticed them arrive. He gathered his things to leave. There was nothing more he could do tonight, when his laptop chimed with an incoming email. Patricia again, sending over the algorithm's code for his review, though she knew he wasn't a programmer. He'd started as one decades ago, but his skills were hopelessly outdated now. Alexander headed back to his office to collect his coat. The hallways were dimly lit, most of the staff long gone. As he approached his office, he noticed the door slightly ajar. A sliver of light spilling into the corridor. He distinctly remembered closing it. Security concerns flashed through his mind. Corporate espionage, journalists seeking information about the financial crisis, or worse. Alexander pushed the door open silently. A small figure sat at his desk, hunched over his keyboard, face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. It was the little girl from the morning, Lily, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration as her fingers flew across the keys. Anger and alarm surged through him. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded. Lily jumped, her eyes wide with fear. I'm sorry." She scrambled away from the computer. "I didn't mean, I was just... Do you have any idea how serious this is?" Alexander strode to the computer. "This is a secure system. These are confidential company files." On the screen, he saw lines of code, the algorithm Patricia had sent. But it had been modified, lines added and removed, comments inserted in the margins. "Did someone send you in here?" he demanded, his mind racing with conspiracy theories. "Who are you working for?" Lily's lower lip trembled. "Nobody. I saw the numbers were wrong." "What?" "The numbers. In your program." She pointed shakily at the screen. "It keeps counting things twice when they cross time zones. And the decimal points move in the wrong direction sometimes." Alexander stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "It's like..." She searched for words. "It's like when you count money from different countries, the program gets confused about when to multiply and when to divide, and it's not checking the dates right." Impossible. This child couldn't possibly understand complex financial algorithms. Yet as Alexander looked at the modifications on the screen, he saw they were addressing exactly the issues Patricia had mentioned. The recursive error, the multi-currency processing. "How did you even get into this system?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Lily looked at her shoes. "Your password was on the sticky note under your keyboard." Alexander closed his eyes briefly. A basic security mistake he'd made in his distraction. "Mama says I'm not supposed to touch other people's things," Lily continued in a small voice. "But I saw all the red numbers on your screen, and you looked so sad this morning. Red numbers are bad. I just wanted to help." Alexander sat heavily in his chair, studying the child before him. "Lily, right?" She nodded. "Where did you learn to code, Lily?" "The library has computers and books." She shrugged. "Numbers make sense to me." Before Alexander could respond, the door burst open. Gloria Washington stood there, her face ashen. "Lily, there you are. I've been looking everywhere." Her eyes darted fearfully between her daughter and Alexander. "Sir, I'm so sorry. My daughter knows she's not supposed to be in here. It won't happen again." Alexander held up his hand. "Mrs. Washington, is it? Please, come in and close the door." Gloria entered hesitantly, clutching Lily's shoulder. "Sir, please, if you need to report this, report me. Don't blame my daughter." Alexander looked at the computer screen, then back at Lily. "Your daughter may have just saved my company." The morning sun streamed through the windows of Alexander's penthouse apartment as he paced the length of his living room, phone pressed to his ear. He hadn't slept. After discovering Lily in his office, he'd spent the night with Patricia and the senior programming team, reviewing the child's modifications to their algorithm. "Yes, Thomas, I understand it sounds incredible," Alexander said to the head of the board, "but the fact remains. The error has been identified and corrected. The missing funds haven't actually left our accounts. They were misallocated by the system. Once we run the corrected algorithm, everything should reconcile." He paused, listening to the skeptical response. "No, I'm not at liberty to discuss exactly how we discovered the error. Let's just say it was an unexpected consultation. I'll explain everything at the board meeting." After ending the call, Alexander stood at his window overlooking Central Park, considering the extraordinary events of the night before. The child, this 7-year-old girl from East Harlem, had identified in minutes what his entire team of experts had missed for weeks. Her solution was elegant in its simplicity. The trading algorithm had a fundamental flaw in how it handled time zone transitions for international transactions. The system double-counted certain exchanges while entirely missing others. Additionally, there was a decimal point error in the currency conversion subroutine that compounded with each transaction. When he'd asked Lily how she spotted it, she'd simply shrugged and said the pattern was wrong. Gloria had been terrified, certain she would be fired. Instead, Alexander had called in his team, and they'd spent hours verifying Lily's corrections. By midnight, they'd confirmed her solution would work. By 3 a.m., they'd implemented it. By dawn, they'd recovered 287 million of the missing funds, with the rest expected to reconcile within days. Alexander's phone rang again. "Patricia." "Final confirmation," she said without preamble. "The algorithm works perfectly now. We've tracked the remaining 13 million to a holding account in Frankfurt. It's already being transferred back, will be fully reconciled before the market opens. And the quarterly report? Being revised as we speak, will actually show a slight profit instead of catastrophic loss." Alexander exhaled slowly. "And the girl's corrections? You've verified everything?" "Multiple times. It's remarkable, sir. The changes she made were, well, they were brilliant. Some of our senior programmers didn't even fully understand them at first." Patricia paused. "If I may ask, who is she? Some prodigy you've been mentoring?" "Something like that," Alexander replied. "I'll see you at the board meeting." After hanging up, Alexander opened his laptop and pulled up the information he'd gathered on the Washington family. Gloria Washington, 34, single mother of 2, works 3 jobs, hospital cafeteria, office cleaning, and weekend shifts at a laundromat. No health insurance. Husband abandoned the family 3 years ago. Currently, 2 months behind on rent for their 1-bedroom apartment in East Harlem. And Lily, 7 years old, 2nd grade student at PS 83. Spotty attendance record despite excellent grades when present. No participation in extracurricular activities or enrichment programs. Teacher comments noted exceptional mathematical ability and remarkable problem-solving skills, but also frequent absences and seems tired in class. Alexander leaned back, contemplating. This child had saved his company, saved 5,000 jobs, his reputation, and billions in market value. And she'd done it because she saw the numbers were wrong, and he looked sad. He made a decision then, as morning light filled his empty penthouse. He'd built his fortune through recognizing opportunity and acting decisively. This was both a debt to be repaid and an opportunity he couldn't ignore. Alexander picked up his phone and called his lawyer. "Richard, I need you to set up an educational trust fund immediately, and I'll need a corporate scholarship program drafted, something specifically for gifted children from underprivileged backgrounds." He paused. "Also, I want to establish a foundation. We'll discuss details later, but I want the paperwork started today." After ending that call, he dialed another number, Gloria Washington's cell phone. She answered on the first ring, her voice cautious. "Mrs. Washington, Alexander Preston, I was hoping you and Lily might join me for lunch today. There's something important I'd like to discuss with you both." The restaurant Alexander had chosen was elegant, but not ostentatious. A small Italian place in Midtown where the waitstaff knew him well enough to ensure privacy. He'd arrived early to prepare, arranging for a private dining room and requesting a special children's menu for Lily. When Gloria and Lily arrived, he noticed they were wearing their Sunday best, Gloria in a modest blue dress that had seen better days, Lily in a neatly pressed plaid jumper with matching hair ribbons. The effort touched him unexpectedly. "Thank you for coming," Alexander said, rising to greet them. "Please, sit." Gloria perched nervously on the edge of her chair. "Mr. Preston, before we begin, I want to apologize again for—" Alexander shook his head. "No more apologies. I didn't ask you here to revisit last night. I asked you here because I have a proposition." He turned to Lily, who was eyeing the bread basket with poorly concealed hunger. "Lily, would you like some bread? The focaccia is excellent." She looked to her mother for permission before taking a piece. "Mrs. Washington—" "Gloria, please. Gloria, what I'm about to tell you must remain confidential." Alexander leaned forward. The error that Lily corrected last night wasn't a minor bookkeeping issue. It was a $300 million discrepancy that threatened to bankrupt my entire company. Gloria's eyes widened. $300 million? Yes. Our entire financial team, including experts I flew in from Switzerland, failed to identify the problem. Lily solved it in under an hour. He smiled at the little girl, who was methodically breaking her bread into perfectly equal pieces. "The board meeting happened this morning. We've recovered all the missing funds. The company is stable again." "I'm glad," Lily said simply, looking up from her bread. "Red numbers make people sad." Alexander felt something tighten in his chest. "Yes, they do." "Mr. Preston," Gloria said cautiously, "why are you telling us this?" "Because I believe in paying my debts, and because I recognize extraordinary talent when I see it." He opened a leather portfolio and removed several documents. "I've drawn up a proposal. I'd like to establish an educational trust for Lily. It would cover her schooling from now through graduate studies at whatever institution she qualifies for." Gloria's hand flew to her mouth. That's very generous, but—" "Additionally," Alexander continued, "I'd like to offer you a position at Pinnacle Enterprises, Gloria. Our human resources department needs an administrative assistant. The salary is twice what you're currently earning from your 3 jobs combined, with full benefits for you and both children." Lily stopped eating, watching the adults intently. "Why would you do this?" Gloria whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Because your daughter saved my company, because talent like hers appears once in a generation, and because—" Alexander hesitated, surprising himself with the emotion in his voice. "Because I know what it's like to have potential, but lack opportunity." He slid another document forward. "This is a lease agreement for a 2-bedroom apartment in a building I own near Central Park. The rent is adjusted to be exactly 20% of your new salary, the recommended portion for housing expenses. There's an excellent public school 2 blocks away with an advanced mathematics program." Gloria stared at the papers, speechless. "Mama," Lily said quietly, "does this mean I can go to school every day? And Marcus can have his own bed?" Gloria covered her daughter's hand with her own. "Mr. Preston, this is overwhelming. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it. Alexander leaned back. Take the papers home. Review them with a lawyer if you wish. I'll cover that expense as well. Can I see the school first? Lily asked suddenly. Before we decide? Alexander smiled. Of course, we can go this afternoon if you'd like. And the apartment, can we see that too? Lily, Gloria admonished gently. Mr. Preston is a busy man. Actually, Alexander said, checking his watch, my afternoon is unexpectedly clear. Board meetings usually run longer when they don't involve celebrating a financial miracle. For the first time, Gloria smiled, a genuine, warm expression that transformed her tired face. Then we'd be honored to see both, wouldn't we, Lily? Lily nodded, her solemn eyes fixed on Alexander. Why are you really doing this, Mr. Preston? Is it just because I fixed your numbers? The directness of the question caught Alexander off guard. He considered his answer carefully. Partly because you fixed my numbers, yes, but also because 25 years ago I was a poor kid with a talent for computers and no way to develop it. Someone gave me a chance, a scholarship that changed my life. I've always believed that when fortune favors you, you have a responsibility to extend that favor to others. Lily considered this, then nodded, as if satisfied. Will I still be able to help Mama sometimes? Lily, Gloria began, but Alexander raised his hand. It's a fair question. And the answer is yes, but not because you have to, because you want to. Your job now, Lily, will be to learn, to develop that remarkable mind of yours. Your mother's job will be to provide for your family, which her new position will allow her to do quite comfortably. Alexander watched as Lily processed this, reorganizing her understanding of the world in that quick, adaptable way children have. Okay, she said finally, but I want to keep learning coding too, not just math. Alexander smiled. I think that can be arranged. 1 month later, Alexander stood in his office, watching the Manhattan skyline as evening descended. The crisis had passed, the company had stabilized, and for the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose beyond the next quarter's profits. His phone buzzed, a text from Gloria with a photo attached. Lily, in her new school uniform, standing proudly beside a science fair project that had taken first place. The caption read, "She wanted you to see this. Thank you again for everything." Alexander smiled, saving the image. He'd visited the Washington family twice in their new apartment, bringing books for Lily and toys for Marcus. The apartment was already transformed. Gloria had a talent for making a space feel like home, with limited resources. Pictures on walls, second-hand furniture arranged with care, and a small desk in Lily's room stacked with advanced mathematics textbooks. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Patricia entered, carrying a tablet. "The new scholarship program proposal is ready for your review," she said. "Finance has allocated the initial $10 million as you requested." Alexander nodded. "And the foundation paperwork?" "Finalized yesterday. The Lily Washington Foundation for Gifted Children is officially incorporated." "No, she doesn't know I named it after her," Alexander said. "Her mother thought it might be too much pressure." Patricia smiled. "Speaking of Lily, I understand she's starting the weekend coding program. Next Saturday. I've arranged for Michael from our development team to mentor her personally." Alexander turned from the window. "Any word from the board about my proposal?" Mixed reactions. Some think creating a youth division for talent development is outside our core business model. Others see the potential long-term benefits. Alexander shrugged. "They'll come around when they see the results. Innovation doesn't come from doing what's expected." As Patricia left, Alexander returned to the window, thinking about the extraordinary chain of events that had led him here. 1 month ago, he'd been facing financial ruin, his company imploding, his legacy in tatters. Now, Pinnacle Enterprises was not only stable, but expanding in new directions. All because a 7-year-old girl with an extraordinary mind happened to be cleaning his office. The irony wasn't lost on him. Throughout his career, he'd sought innovation from the most prestigious universities, the most acclaimed experts. He'd overlooked the simple truth that brilliance appears in unexpected places, in people society often renders invisible. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Preston, your car is waiting downstairs." "Thank you, Sarah. I'm on my way." Alexander was having dinner with the Washingtons tonight, a casual affair at their apartment. Gloria had insisted on cooking to thank him, despite his protests that no thanks were necessary. He'd finally agreed, recognizing her need to reciprocate in some way. As he gathered his things, his eye caught the small photograph on his desk, the one of him and his father outside their hardware store. Beside it now stood a new frame, containing a child's drawing. Lily had given it to him last week, a carefully rendered sketch of the Pinnacle Enterprises building with tiny figures standing outside. She'd labeled them meticulously, Mr. Preston, Mama, Marcus, and me. Alexander picked up his coat and headed toward the elevator, feeling something he hadn't experienced in decades, a sense of family. Not by blood, but by something perhaps more meaningful, a connection forged through unexpected circumstances and mutual respect. He'd given Lily an opportunity, yes, but she'd given him something far more valuable, a reminder of why he'd built this company in the first place, not just to create wealth, but to make a difference. The elevator doors closed, carrying him down toward a future suddenly rich with new possibilities. 6 months had transformed the Washington family's life beyond recognition. Their East Harlem apartment was a distant memory, replaced by a sun-filled home near Central Park, where Marcus had his own bedroom decorated with dinosaur wallpaper, and Lily had a dedicated study space with a computer Alexander had personally selected. Gloria had flourished in her role at Pinnacle, her natural organizational skills and warm personality making her a valuable addition to the human resources team. She'd recently been promoted to Assistant Director of Employee Relations, a position created to leverage her unique ability to connect with staff across all levels. On this crisp Saturday morning in November, Alexander stood in the doorway of Pinnacle's new Youth Innovation Lab, watching Lily work alongside 5 other gifted children, the first beneficiaries of the scholarship program he'd established. At 8, she'd celebrated her birthday last month with her first ever proper party. Lily's mathematical abilities had tested at a high school level, while her coding skills continued to develop at an astonishing rate. "She's extraordinary," Michael Chen, the development team leader Alexander had assigned to mentor Lily, whispered as he joined Alexander at the door. "She just intuitively understands systems in a way that's, well, it's not normal." Alexander nodded. "Any progress on the pattern recognition project?" "She completed it yesterday, 3 weeks ahead of schedule." Inside the lab, Lily sat cross-legged on a beanbag chair, her dark hair now styled in a neat bob rather than the uneven pigtails of their first meeting. She was explaining something to Jaden, a 9-year-old boy from the Bronx, whose talent for spatial reasoning had been discovered at a community center chess tournament. "Mr. Preston," Lily called, spotting him. She bounded over, tablet in hand. "I figured out how to make the facial recognition work without using so much processing power." "Want to see?" "Absolutely," Alexander replied, allowing himself to be pulled into the room. These Saturday sessions had become the highlight of his week, a welcome break from board meetings and investor calls. As Lily demonstrated her solution, Alexander marveled at how naturally she'd adapted to her new circumstances. Unlike some of the other scholarship children who struggled with imposter syndrome or social integration, Lily approached each new opportunity with unshakable confidence and genuine curiosity. "See? It's analyzing patterns in real time," Lily explained, pointing to the screen. "It works on low-end devices too, not just fancy computers." "Impressive," Alexander said sincerely. "What practical applications do you see for this?" Lily's expression grew serious, as it always did when she considered real-world implications. It could help people who can't speak, or doctors in places without good internet. Or, her eyes lit up, it could help Marcus's friend Thomas, who has autism and sometimes can't understand people's expressions. This was what Alexander found most remarkable about Lily. Her instinct was always to use technology to help others. While most tech executives typically thought first about marketability and profit margins, Lily's innovations invariably began with a human need. After the session ended, Alexander drove Lily home, as had become their custom. Gloria worked Saturday mornings at Pinnacle's Community Outreach Program, another initiative born from their unexpected connection. "How's school going?" Alexander asked as they navigated through weekend traffic. "Good. Ms. Abernathy says I can join the 5th grade math class next semester." Lily adjusted her seatbelt. "But Joey Friedman still says I only got into Westside Academy because you paid them." Alexander frowned. "Is he still bothering you?" "Not really bothering, just saying things." Lily shrugged. "Mama says some people feel better about themselves when they make others feel worse. Your mother is a wise woman. She also says I shouldn't let it bother me because I earned my place there by being smart." Alexander nodded. "She's right about that too." They drove in comfortable silence before Lily spoke again. "Mr. Preston, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you lonely? You have a big apartment, but you live by yourself. And you spend a lot of Saturdays with us instead of with other grown-ups." The directness of the question startled a laugh from Alexander. "What makes you ask that?" "You look sad sometimes when you think no one's watching, like my mama used to look before we met you." Alexander considered his answer carefully. "I suppose I am sometimes. My work kept me so busy for so many years that I didn't make time for a family of my own." "But you have lots of money. Couldn't you just stop working so much?" "It's not quite that simple," Alexander replied, smiling at her logic. "But you're right that money isn't everything. I've learned that rather late in life." As they pulled up to the Washington's building, Lily unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't immediately get out of the car. "You could be part of our family, you know," she said matter-of-factly. "Marcus already calls you Uncle Alex when you're not around. And Mama smiles different when she talks about you." Before Alexander could respond to this startling revelation, Lily had grabbed her backpack and was out the door with a casual, "See you tomorrow for dinner," tossed over her shoulder. Alexander sat in the idling car, watching her disappear into the building. At 53, he'd long ago resigned himself to a life defined by professional success rather than personal connections. The idea that he might have accidentally stumbled into a family at this stage of his life was both terrifying and strangely exhilarating. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Thomas Blackwell, chairman of the board. "Preston," he answered. "We need to talk," Thomas said without preamble. "There's been a leak about the Washington girl. The Journal is running a story tomorrow." The headline in the Wall Street Journal's Sunday edition was more sensational than Alexander had feared. "Child Genius Saves Tech Giant. How a 7-year-old cleaning lady's daughter rescued Pinnacle from 300-minute disaster." Alexander paced his office, phone pressed to his ear as he spoke with his PR director. How did they get this information? The board members all signed confidentiality agreements. "Unknown source," Jane replied tensely, "but they have details that only someone intimately familiar with the situation would know." A soft knock interrupted them. Gloria stood in the doorway, her face drawn with concern. I'll call you back, Alexander told Jane, ending the call. Gloria, I'm so sorry about this. I was just trying to get ahead of it. Gloria entered, closing the door behind her. Reporters are outside our building. They tried to talk to Lily when she went out with Mrs. Rodriguez to get groceries. Alexander swore under his breath. I'll send security right away. And we can move you to a hotel if... That's not why I'm here, Gloria interrupted, her voice steady despite her obvious distress. Alexander, we need to talk about what happens next. This attention, it's not good for Lily. I know. We're implementing a full media strategy. I've already spoken with the school about additional security. I'm not talking about security. Gloria sat down, her posture perfect despite her exhaustion. I'm talking about what this kind of attention does to a child, the pressure, the expectations, being seen as some kind of miracle instead of just a little girl. Alexander stopped pacing, struck by the genuine fear in Gloria's eyes. What do you want me to do? I don't know, she admitted. Part of me wants to take the children and disappear somewhere quiet, but I know that's not practical. And it wouldn't be fair to Lily to deny her the opportunities she has here. Alexander sat across from her. For what it's worth, I think Lily is remarkably grounded. She doesn't seem impressed by attention or status. That's because she hasn't been exposed to much of it yet. But this, Gloria gestured toward the newspaper on his desk, this changes everything. Now she's not just a gifted child getting an opportunity. She's a public figure, a story, a commodity. The word commodity hit Alexander like a physical blow. Was that how people would see his relationship with the Washingtons now? A calculated investment in a human asset. We won't let that happen, he said firmly. How can you stop it? You're a public figure yourself. Pinnacle is a major corporation. This story has everything. Drama, a child prodigy, corporate intrigue, rags to riches. They'll never leave her alone now. Alexander leaned forward. Gloria, I promise you, I will protect Lily from this. Whatever it takes. Gloria's expression softened slightly. I know you care about her, about all of us. But this is bigger than any of us anticipated. As they discussed options, Alexander's phone buzzed repeatedly with incoming calls and messages. He silenced it without looking. She asked me something interesting yesterday, Alexander said quietly. She asked if I was lonely. Gloria glanced at him, surprised. What did you tell her? The truth. That I am sometimes, that I prioritized work over personal connections for too many years. He paused. She also mentioned that Marcus calls me Uncle Alex when I'm not around. A faint blush colored Gloria's cheeks. Children notice everything and filter nothing. I hope that doesn't make you uncomfortable. Quite the opposite, Alexander replied. It's been meaningful to be part of your family's life these past months. The elevator doors opened, revealing Thomas Blackwell waiting in the parking garage, his expression grim. Alexander, we need to talk before you make any public statements, Thomas said, barely acknowledging Gloria. The board is calling an emergency meeting. It can wait, Alexander replied. I'm dealing with a personal matter. Thomas's eyebrows rose. Personal? This is a corporate crisis. Our stock is already fluctuating based on this news. Alexander felt Gloria tense beside him. Thomas, this is Gloria Washington, our Director of Employee Relations. Gloria, Thomas Blackwell, Chairman of the Board. Thomas nodded curtly. Mrs. Washington, I've heard good things about your work, but perhaps you could excuse us for a moment. This is a sensitive corporate matter. Before Gloria could respond, Alexander said firmly, Gloria and her family are at the center of this situation. She stays. Thomas's expression hardened. Alex, you're letting emotions cloud your judgment. This needs to be handled strategically. The girl is a tremendous asset, but... The girl, Alexander interrupted coldly, is an 8-year-old child named Lily. not an asset, not a commodity, a child. Of course, Thomas backpedaled. Poor choice of words. What I mean is, her connection to Pinnacle is valuable, and we need to manage it properly. Gloria stepped forward. Mr. Blackwell, with all due respect, there is nothing to manage about my daughter. She is not affiliated with Pinnacle Enterprises in any official capacity. Ah, but the scholarship program, the foundation, all bearing the Pinnacle name, were established as charitable initiatives, Alexander finished, not corporate recruiting tools. Thomas sighed. You're not seeing the bigger picture. The market is responding to this girl's story. We need to leverage this situation. Alexander felt a cold anger building. There is no situation to leverage. There's a family whose privacy has been invaded and a child who deserves protection from exactly this kind of exploitation. I don't understand why I can't go to school, Lily said, arms crossed as she sat on the living room couch. 2 weeks had passed since the Wall Street Journal article, and the media frenzy had only intensified. I finished all the worksheets Ms. Abernathy sent home, and I miss my friends. Gloria exchanged a glance with Alexander, who had become a near-constant presence in their home since the story broke. They'd established a routine. Alexander worked remotely from their dining room, helping manage the media situation while providing an extra layer of security and support. "Sweetheart," Gloria began gently, "we've talked about this. The reporters are still watching the school. It wouldn't be fair to the other students." But why do they care about me so much? I just fixed some numbers. People fix things every day." Alexander sat beside Lily. "What you did was extraordinary, Lily. People are fascinated by children who can do things most adults can't. Remember how we talked about privacy and why it's important?" Lily nodded reluctantly. "Because people might want to use me instead of just knowing me." "Exactly. And right now a lot of people are interested in using your story for their own purposes. Some want to sell newspapers. Some want to prove points about education or technology. Some want to make money from your abilities." "Like Mr. Blackwell?" Lily asked innocently. Alexander blinked in surprise. "What do you know about Mr. Blackwell?" "I heard you and Mama talking. He wants to make me Pinnacle's mascot." She pronounced the word carefully, having clearly just learned it. "Like a sports team, but for a company." Gloria closed her eyes briefly. "We need to be more careful about our conversations." "It's not your fault," Lily said matter-of-factly. "I have excellent auditory processing. Dr. Winters at the Cognitive Assessment Center said so." Despite the tension, Alexander couldn't help smiling. "Yes, you do. And to answer your question, yes, some people at Pinnacle, including Mr. Blackwell, think the company should be more public about our connection to you. And you don't want that? I want what's best for you, and right now that means protecting your privacy and your childhood." Lily considered this, her expression serious beyond her years. "Is your job in trouble because of me?" "No," Alexander said firmly. "My job is secure." This wasn't entirely true. The board had been divided during yesterday's emergency meeting, with several members supporting Thomas's position that Alexander's personal involvement with the Washingtons represented a conflict of interest. Lily studied his face with uncomfortable perceptiveness. "You're not telling the whole truth. Your eyebrow twitches when you're hiding something." Gloria suppressed a smile as Alexander touched his eyebrow self-consciously. "It's complicated, Lily," he admitted. "Some people at the company disagree with how I've handled this situation, but that's normal in business. People disagree all the time." "Because of the money? Marcus said you must have spent millions of dollars on us, and that's why people are mad." Alexander shot a questioning look at Gloria, who shrugged helplessly. "Mrs. Rodriguez's husband works in financial news," she explained. "He's been rather vocal about his theories." "The money is not the issue," Alexander said, choosing his words carefully. "I've spent my own personal funds on your educational trust and this apartment, not company money. The scholarship program and foundation are corporate initiatives, but they benefit many children, not just you. Then what's the problem? Alexander sighed. How did one explain corporate politics and public relations to an 8-year-old, even one as precocious as Lily? The problem is that some people think I'm making decisions based on personal feelings rather than what's best for the company. Aren't they the same thing? You said companies should help people. They should. But it's more complicated than that when public companies are involved. There are shareholders and regulations and... Alexander stopped, seeing Lily's eyes glaze over. The point is, you don't need to worry about my job. I've been running Pinnacle for 22 years. I know how to handle these situations. Gloria, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. Lily, why don't you go help Marcus with his reading? He's struggling with that new book. Once Lily had left the room, Gloria turned to Alexander. How bad is it, really? Alexander ran a hand through his silver hair. Thomas is pushing for a vote of no confidence. He's got about 40% of the board on his side. Because of us? Partially. The media attention has complicated things, but there's more to it. Thomas has wanted to take Pinnacle in a different direction for years. More aggressive expansion, less focus on ethical innovation. He's using this situation as leverage. Gloria's expression tightened. Then perhaps we should step back. I can resign my position. Lily can switch schools. We can... No, Alexander interrupted firmly. That's exactly what Thomas wants. He's trying to force me to choose between Pinnacle and your family. And if you had to choose? Alexander met her gaze directly. 6 months ago, I was a wealthy, successful man with an empty life. My company was everything to me because I had nothing else. Now, he hesitated. Now I have Sunday dinners to look forward to. Children's artwork on my refrigerator. Someone who notices when my eyebrow twitches. Gloria's eyes softened. Alexander, I'm not going to let Thomas win this, Gloria, and I'm not going to let him turn Lily into a corporate spectacle. But I need time to outmaneuver him. The documentary premiered on Thursday evening at Pinnacle's headquarters, one day before the scheduled board vote that could potentially end Alexander's leadership. The screening room was filled with board members, major shareholders, and selected media representatives, all of whom had signed strict confidentiality agreements. The Washingtons sat in the front row beside Alexander, Lily between her mother and the CEO. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back with a headband, looking very much like any other 8-year-old despite the extraordinary circumstances. As the lights dimmed, Alexander felt a small hand slip into his. He glanced down to see Lily looking up at him with solemn eyes. "It's going to be okay," she whispered with a child's certainty. I calculated the probabilities. Despite his tension, Alexander smiled. "Did you now? And what did you determine?" 73% chance of a positive outcome, higher if Mrs. Winters cries during the movie. She influences at least 4 board members. Alexander stifled a laugh, amazed yet again by Lily's unique blend of mathematical precision and intuitive understanding of human nature. The documentary, titled Unseen Potential, began with stark statistics about gifted children from underprivileged backgrounds. How many went unidentified, how few received appropriate educational support, how their potential contributions to society often remained unrealized. It then introduced several children from the Pinnacle Scholarship Program, including Jaden with his remarkable spatial reasoning, Maria with her linguistic genius, and Darnell with his innovative approach to engineering challenges. Lily was presented as one of many exceptional children, her story of saving Pinnacle mentioned but not sensationalized. The film skillfully wove together the children's stories with commentary from educational experts, neuroscientists and economists, building a compelling case for investing in talent regardless of socioeconomic background. It showed Saturday sessions at the Innovation Lab, family dinners, homework struggles, and ordinary childhood moments, humanizing the children rather than presenting them as prodigies to be exploited. Midway through, Gloria appeared on screen, speaking candidly about her experiences as a single mother trying to nurture Lily's exceptional abilities while working multiple jobs. "People ask if I always knew she was gifted," Gloria said in the interview. "The truth is, I knew she was special, but I was too busy trying to keep a roof over our heads to do anything about it. That's the reality for so many parents. You see the potential in your child, but you lack the resources to develop it." When the film ended, there was a moment of profound silence before the applause began. Alexander scanned the room, noting the emotional reactions. Patricia Winters was indeed dabbing at her eyes, as were several board members who had previously aligned with Thomas. As the lights came up, Thomas approached their row, his expression unreadable. "Impressive production," he said to Alexander. "Very moving." "Thank you," Alexander replied cautiously. Thomas turned to Gloria. "Mrs. Washington, your interview was particularly compelling. You spoke very eloquently about the challenges facing parents of exceptional children." Gloria nodded politely. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. It's a reality many families face." Thomas's gaze shifted to Lily. "And you, young lady, were very natural on camera, not at all what I expected." Before Alexander could intervene, Lily replied, "I wasn't trying to be anything, Mr. Blackwell. I was just being myself." Something in her straightforward response seemed to give Thomas pause. He studied her for a moment longer than was comfortable. "Indeed," he finally said. "Well, it's getting late. I should let you get home. School night and all that." As Thomas walked away, Alexander exchanged a glance with Gloria. Something had shifted, but it was too soon to tell if it was in their favor. The reception following the screening was brief, with Alexander careful to keep Lily away from the more aggressive journalists. By 9 o'clock, they were in his car heading back to the Washingtons' apartment. "You did wonderfully, Lily," Gloria said, reaching back to squeeze her daughter's hand. "I'm very proud of how you handled yourself." "Did I help Mr. Preston keep his job?" Lily asked directly. Alexander and Gloria exchanged a look. "We won't know until tomorrow," Alexander replied honestly. "But whatever happens, you have nothing to worry about. Your educational trust is secure, as is your mother's position at Pinnacle. But you might have to leave." "It's a possibility," Alexander admitted, "but a remote one." They rode in silence for a few blocks before Lily spoke again. "If you have to leave Pinnacle, will you still come for Sunday dinners?" The question caught Alexander off guard. "Of course I would, if you and your mother still wanted me to." "Good," Lily said decisively. "Because you're part of our family now, and families stick together even when things get hard." Gloria met Alexander's eyes in the rearview mirror, her expression soft with an emotion he'd seen growing between them these past months, but neither had yet named. "Yes," she said quietly. "Families stick together." The boardroom was silent as Alexander finished his presentation. He'd spent the night preparing a comprehensive overview of Pinnacle's ethical innovation initiatives, including the scholarship program, STEM education partnerships, and talent development pipeline. Thomas sat at the opposite end of the table, his expression giving nothing away. The other board members watched Alexander with varying degrees of support or skepticism evident in their faces. "Thank you for that thorough presentation, Alexander," Thomas said when he'd finished. "Before we move to the vote, I'd like to share some thoughts of my own." Alexander braced himself. This was it, Thomas's final push to oust him from the company he'd built. "When this situation first came to light," Thomas began, "I saw it as a potential liability, a CEO making emotional decisions that might compromise shareholder value. I believed Alexander's personal attachment to the Washington family represented a conflict of interest that threatened Pinnacle's stability." Several board members nodded in agreement. However, Thomas continued. After considerable reflection, and particularly after viewing last night's documentary, I've come to a different conclusion. Alexander struggled to maintain a neutral expression. This was unexpected. The tech industry has a long history of overlooking talent that doesn't fit our preconceived notions of what innovation looks like. We search for the next Steve Jobs in Ivy League dorm rooms and Silicon Valley incubators, ignoring the vast potential in communities we rarely engage with. Thomas paused. Alexander's instinct to nurture talent wherever he finds it isn't a liability. It's exactly the kind of innovative thinking that built Pinnacle in the first place. Murmurs rippled around the table as board members exchanged surprised glances. Therefore, Thomas concluded, I am withdrawing my motion for a vote of no confidence. Instead, I propose we formally adopt the Pinnacle Potential Initiative as a cornerstone of our corporate strategy, with expanded funding and a dedicated executive oversight committee. The tension in the room visibly dissipated. Board members who had been preparing for a contentious vote now relaxed in their chairs, many nodding in approval at Thomas's proposal. I'd be happy to serve on that committee, Patricia offered immediately. As would I, added Jensen, who had previously aligned with Thomas against Alexander. Alexander waited for the other shoe to drop, for Thomas to reveal some hidden agenda behind this apparent reversal. But the chairman simply turned to him with what appeared to be genuine respect. Alexander, would you be willing to lead this initiative in addition to your CEO responsibilities? Given your personal investment in its success, you seem the natural choice. I would, Alexander replied cautiously, though I'd want Gloria Washington involved as well, given her unique perspective and her professional expertise in human resources. Thomas nodded. An excellent suggestion, Mrs. Washington has proven herself a valuable addition to the Pinnacle team. After the meeting adjourned, Alexander remained in the boardroom, trying to process what had just happened. Thomas lingered as well, approaching once the others had left. You're wondering if this is some kind of trap, Thomas said bluntly. The thought had crossed my mind, Alexander admitted. Thomas smiled wryly. I've opposed you on many issues over the years, Alexander, but I've never questioned your integrity. The documentary last night, seeing those children, hearing their stories, it reminded me why I joined Pinnacle's board in the first place. Not just for profit, but for purpose. What changed your mind about Lily specifically? Thomas considered the question. Something she said to me after the screening, that she wasn't trying to be anything, just being herself. It struck me that while we've been arguing about how to present her story or protect her privacy, we've been missing the point. She's not a corporate asset or a PR problem. She's a child with extraordinary gifts who deserves the chance to develop them without adult agendas attached. That evening, as Alexander prepared to pick up Gloria for dinner, his phone rang. It was Lily. Mr. Preston, Mama said you're taking her on a date tonight. Alexander nearly dropped the phone. She did she? Well, she said you were having dinner to discuss something important. But she's wearing her special perfume and the blue dress she only wears for important occasions. So I calculated a 94% probability it's a date. Alexander laughed, both at Lily's logic and at his own transparency. Your mathematical models are impressive as always, Lily. Does this mean you might become my dad someday? The question was asked with such directness that Alexander had to sit down. That's a very complicated question, Lily. Not really, she replied matter-of-factly. You love us. We love you. The rest is just logistics. Out of the mouths of babes, Alexander thought, marveling at how this child could reduce the most complex adult emotions to their essence. We'll see what happens, he said gently. But whatever does, you know I'll always be there for you and Marcus, right? I know, Lily said confidently. That's what family means. 5 years later, Alexander stood at the back of the auditorium, watching with barely contained pride as 13-year-old Lily Washington delivered her TED Talk on algorithmic bias in educational assessment software. At his side, Gloria squeezed his hand, her wedding ring catching the light. "She's amazing," Gloria whispered. "I still can't believe she's our daughter." Alexander nodded, his throat tight with emotion. On stage, Lily moved with confidence, her explanation of complex mathematical concepts clear and accessible, her passion for educational equity evident in every word. The audience, a mix of tech executives, educators, and policymakers, watched with rapt attention as this teenage prodigy outlined solutions to problems many hadn't even recognized existed. "And that's why it matters who writes the code," Lily concluded. "Algorithms aren't neutral. They reflect the perspectives, priorities, and blind spots of their creators. If we want technology that serves everyone equally, we need diverse voices in its creation, including young voices like mine." The applause was immediate and thunderous. Alexander and Gloria exchanged proud glances as Lily fielded questions with the poise of someone twice her age. In the front row, 10-year-old Marcus gave his sister an enthusiastic thumbs up. Beside him sat the newest addition to their family, 3-year-old Sophia, adopted 2 years after Alexander and Gloria's wedding. She bounced excitedly on her seat, too young to understand the presentation, but old enough to know her big sister was doing something important. As the session ended and people began to file out, Thomas Blackwell approached Alexander and Gloria. "Remarkable presentation," he said, genuine admiration in his voice. "Lily continues to exceed all expectations." "Thank you, Thomas," Alexander replied warmly. The animosity between them had long since faded, replaced by mutual respect and a shared commitment to the Pinnacle Potential Initiative, which now operated in 12 cities across the country. "The new cohort of scholars starts next month," Thomas continued. 25 children, our largest group yet. The early assessment data suggests we may have found another mathematical prodigy, a 9-year-old boy from Detroit. "Lily will be excited to meet him," Gloria said. "She loves mentoring the younger students." Ooh. As they gathered their things to leave, a reporter approached, recorder in hand. "Lily, would you have time for a few questions? I'm doing a follow-up piece on the 5th anniversary of the Pinnacle Potential Initiative." Lily glanced at her parents, who nodded their approval. "Just a few minutes," Gloria said. "We have dinner reservations to celebrate." While Lily spoke with the reporter, Alexander found himself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. 5 years ago, he'd been a successful but lonely man on the verge of professional disaster. One chance encounter with a remarkable child had not only saved his company, but transformed his life in ways he could never have imagined. The Pinnacle Potential Initiative now served hundreds of gifted children from underprivileged backgrounds. The Lily Washington Foundation had expanded beyond STEM education to include arts programs, recognizing that genius manifested in many forms. But Alexander's greatest joy came from the family he'd found so unexpectedly. Gloria, whose strength and compassion complemented his own drive and vision. Marcus, whose artistic talents and emotional intelligence balanced Lily's analytical brilliance. Baby Sophia, adopted from foster care, who brought a new dimension of love to their already full home. Lily rejoined them, slipping her hand into Alexander's as they walked toward the exit. "The reporter asked if finding me was the luckiest moment of your career," she said, looking up at him curiously. "Is that how you see it? As luck?" Alexander considered the question seriously. "Not luck," he finally said. "Recognition, perhaps. I recognize something special in you, just as you recognize the pattern in those numbers. But the real miracle wasn't the math. It was that you cared enough to help a stranger who looked sad." Lily smiled, satisfied with the answer. "I'm glad you looked sad that day." "I'm glad you noticed," Alexander replied, his voice thick with emotion. As they stepped outside into the fading afternoon light, their family complete and together, Alexander reflected that true fortune had little to do with the wealth he'd accumulated or the company he'd built. It lay in the momentary kindness of a child with an extraordinary mind and an even more extraordinary heart. A child who had not only saved his company, but had shown him what really mattered. Some might call it luck, finding a mathematical prodigy in the most unexpected place. But Alexander Preston knew better. It wasn't about finding a prodigy. It was about finding... "If you translate this document, I'll give you my leftovers," laughed the young millionaire CEO who only cared about money. But the 8-year-old homeless girl silenced him. "Before we begin, tell me something about where you live. What's the weather like today?" Marcus Wellington's Armani shoes clicked against the marble floor of his penthouse office like a metronome counting money. At 28, he commanded a tech empire worth $400 million, built from the ground up after his father abandoned the family 13 years ago. The San Francisco skyline stretched beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, but Marcus saw only numbers, profit margins, stock prices, acquisition targets that would add another zero to his net worth. "Sir, the Peterson contract needs your signature," his assistant Jennifer announced, placing documents on his mahogany desk with trembling hands. She'd learned to approach him carefully, like someone handling a venomous snake. Marcus barely glanced up from his triple-monitor setup, displaying real-time market data. Did they agree to the 15% increase? There, hesitant about the translation services clause. "They're saying it's excessive for what amounts to basic document conversion." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Tell them if they want their product documentation translated into Spanish, they pay premium rates. These immigrants should learn English anyway, instead of expecting us to accommodate their laziness." Jennifer shifted uncomfortably, her conscience warring with her mortgage payments. "Mr. Wellington, perhaps we could offer a more reasonable rate. The school district contract specifically mentioned helping underprivileged children." "No negotiations." Marcus's voice carried the cold efficiency that made him millions and enemies in equal measure. "They want our software? They pay our price. Period. I didn't build this company by giving handouts to people too lazy to adapt." He signed with sharp, angry strokes that seemed to slash through the paper. "I want you to draft a memo to all department heads. Any future contracts involving translation services get marked up by 20% minimum. If these people want to live in America, they can damn well learn to speak American." Jennifer bit her lip. "Sir, some of these contracts involve elementary schools and what? You think I got where I am by caring about every sob story that crosses my desk?" Marcus stood abruptly, his chair spinning behind him. "My father taught me the only lesson that matters. Money is the only relationship that won't betray you. Everything else, family, friendship, charity, it's all weakness disguised as virtue." The December rain pelted against the windows like bullets, each droplet reflecting the neon glow of the financial district. Marcus slipped into his custom coat, worth more than most people's monthly salary, feeling the familiar weight of Italian wool and German buttons. "Reschedule tomorrow's board meeting," he commanded, heading toward the private elevator. "I want revised projections that show we can cut translation services entirely from our standard packages. Why should we subsidize linguistic incompetence?" As the elevator descended 40 floors, Marcus felt the familiar satisfaction of another profitable day. The numbers on his phone screen showed his net worth had increased by $50,000 since morning. Money was the only language that mattered, the only relationship worth maintaining. Everything else was sentiment for people too weak to face reality. The lobby's revolving doors spun Marcus onto Montgomery Street, where his driver waited beside a gleaming black Tesla Model S Plaid. The car's presence commanded respect, or at least recognition of power, but as he approached the vehicle, something caught his attention in his peripheral vision. a small figure huddled against the building's side entrance, barely visible in the shadows cast by the overhang. She was so still, Marcus almost missed her entirely, like a piece of urban camouflage designed to blend into the city's harsh geometry. A little girl, no more than 8 years old, sat on a piece of cardboard that had once advertised a luxury apartment complex. Her thin jacket, clearly from a donation bin, was inadequate against the San Francisco chill that cut through the financial district like a blade. Her dark hair hung in tangled strands around a face that should have been in a warm classroom, not on cold concrete. Marcus paused, his hand hovering over the Tesla's door handle. The child looked up with enormous brown eyes that seemed to see straight through his expensive facade, past the Italian leather and Swiss timepieces, into something he'd thought he'd successfully buried years ago. In her small hands, she held a worn notebook bound with rubber bands and a pencil stub worn down to barely an inch. Despite the cold, despite the obvious hunger that hollowed her cheeks, her grip on these items was fierce and protective. "Spare change, mister?" "Ungi?" she asked in a voice barely above a whisper, yet somehow it cut through the urban noise like a church bell. "Get a job," Marcus replied automatically, the same response he gave to every panhandler who dared approach him. The words came out harsher than usual, perhaps because something in her eyes made him uncomfortable in a way he couldn't name. But something in the little girl's eyes made Marcus hesitate, his hand frozen on the car door handle. She didn't look away or shrink back like the others did when he dismissed them. Instead, she tilted her head with curious intelligence, studying him with the intensity of a scientist examining a particularly interesting specimen. "I can't get a job, mister. I'm only 8. Her voice held no resentment, no accusation, just simple, devastating truth delivered with startling clarity. "But I can read and write real good. Better than some grown-ups, I think. Want me to show you?" Marcus glanced at his Rolex, 7:15. His dinner reservation at the exclusive Prestige Club was at 8, and punctuality was everything in business. Time was money, and money was everything. Yet he found himself rooted to the spot, staring down at this child who spoke with the kind of directness that had been stripped from his adult world by lawyers and PR consultants. "What's your name?" The question escaped before he could stop it, surprising them both. "Emma Rodriguez. What's yours?" The directness caught him off guard like a left hook he never saw coming. When was the last time someone asked his name without first calculating his net worth? Without that gleam of opportunism that turned every conversation into a business transaction? Marcus Wellington. Emma's eyes widened with recognition, but not the usual awe or calculation he expected. Not the gold-digger sparkle or the intimidated fear. Instead, something that looked almost like sympathy. "You're the man who owns the big building with all the computers." She pointed toward his tower, its windows glowing like a monument to digital dominance. "My teacher used to talk about you in class. Before." Emma's voice trailed off, her small fingers tightening around the pencil like a lifeline. Marcus felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest, something he hadn't experienced since his father walked out. "Before what?" "Before the accident. Before I had to leave school." Emma held up her notebook with reverent care. "But I still practice writing every day, just like Miss Santos taught us. Words are important, don't you think? They're like bridges between people's hearts." Marcus felt his throat constrict. When had anyone spoken to him about hearts? In his world, people had portfolios, assets, leverage, but hearts? Hearts were liability, emotional overhead that decreased efficiency. "Where are your parents?" Emma's expression grew solemn, aged beyond her years. "They're with the Angels now. Car accident 2 years ago. A drunk driver ran a red light while Mama and Papa were coming to pick me up from after-school care." She stated it matter-of-factly, like reciting a memorized lesson. "The social workers tried to find me a home, but there aren't enough families for all the kids who need them." The rain began falling harder, and Marcus watched droplets cling to Emma's eyelashes like tiny crystals. His driver honked impatiently, probably worried about traffic to the Marina district, but Marcus didn't move. What's in the notebook? Emma's face transformed, lighting up like Christmas morning. Stories! I write about places I want to visit someday, and I copy down interesting words from newspapers people throw away. Big words that sound like music when you say them out loud. Want to see? Before Marcus could respond, Emma flipped open her notebook with the careful reverence of someone handling a sacred text. The pages were filled with meticulous handwriting. Stories about magical kingdoms where hungry children found warm homes, where families never broke apart, where money couldn't buy happiness because everyone already had enough love. "This one's my favorite," Emma said, pointing to a paragraph written in purple crayon. "It's about a very rich man who forgot how to smile because he spent so much time counting his treasures that he forgot to count his blessings. But then he met a little girl who reminded him that the most valuable things can't be purchased or sold." Marcus stared at the page, his throat suddenly as dry as sand. The handwriting was remarkably neat for a child, each letter formed with deliberate care. Did you write that yourself? Yesterday morning, I saw you walking by. You walk by every day at exactly 7:15. And I wondered what makes someone so successful look so lonely all the time. I'm not lonely, I'm focused. There's a difference. Emma studied his face with unsettling perception, her brown eyes seeming to catalogue every line of stress, every shadow of exhaustion. "My mama used to say the loneliest people are the ones who have everything material, but feel empty inside their souls. She said money was like salt, a little bit makes life better. But too much ruins everything it touches." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, striking something deep and carefully buried. He stepped backward, his polished Italian shoes splashing in a puddle that reflected the neon lights of the financial district like a broken kaleidoscope. "You don't know anything about me," he said. But his voice lacked its usual authority, coming out more like a plea than a statement. Emma closed her notebook carefully, protecting it from the rain, with movements that spoke of long practice. "I know you walk by here every day at exactly 7:15, wearing different expensive suits, but the same sad expression. I know you never look at people when they ask for help. You look through them like they're invisible. And I know you just asked my name, which means somewhere deep inside, you still remember how to care about someone besides yourself." Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from the Prestige Club, confirming his reservation and reminding him about the evening's networking opportunities. 3 potential mergers would be discussed over appetizers. A billionaire from Seattle wanted to discuss cryptocurrency investments over the main course. His accountant would present tax avoidance strategies during dessert. Instead of reading the message, he found himself crouching down to Emma's eye level, his expensive pants touching the wet concrete. "You're very intelligent for 8 years old. Intelligence doesn't keep you warm or fed," Emma replied with devastating honesty. "But it helps you hope for a better tomorrow. Miss Santos used to say that hope was like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. What do you hope for?" Emma considered this seriously, her young face growing thoughtful in a way that reminded Marcus uncomfortably of his own childhood dreams, back when he'd wanted to be a teacher or a social worker, before his father taught him that helping people was for suckers. "A place where I belong, people who want me around not because of what I can give them, but just because they like having me there. Maybe a chance to go back to school and become a teacher like Miss Santos was, so I can help other kids learn that words have power." "Ah, what happened to Miss Santos?" Emma's expression darkened like clouds covering the sun. "Budget cuts. The school district fired all the bilingual teachers at Roosevelt Elementary, said there wasn't enough money to help kids like me learn in both languages." Her voice carried no bitterness, only profound sadness. "Miss Santos cried when she had to tell our class goodbye. She said she was sorry she couldn't protect us from grown-up decisions." Something cold and uncomfortable settled in Marcus's stomach, like spoiled food. His company had just signed the contract with the San Francisco Unified School District, the one where he'd refused to provide affordable translation services. the one where he'd marked up prices specifically to discourage what he called linguistic welfare. "Which school?" he asked quietly, though part of him already knew the answer. "Roosevelt Elementary on Mission Street. They had to close the whole bilingual program because they couldn't afford to translate textbooks and lessons for Spanish-speaking families." Emma hugged her notebook closer to her chest. "Miss Santos said some rich computer man decided it cost too much money to help kids like me succeed. She didn't say it mean, just sad, like when you watch something beautiful break and can't fix it." The rain fell harder, but Marcus barely noticed the water soaking through his coat. He saw his own signature on the contract, his harsh words about immigrants and English, his cold calculation that had eliminated an entire program designed to help vulnerable children. "Emma," he said slowly, his voice hoarse, "what if someone could fix that? What if the translation program came back?" Emma's eyes filled with hope so pure and intense, it made Marcus's chest ache like he was having a heart attack. Could that really happen? Could Miss Santos come back and teach us again? Marcus stood abruptly, his mind racing through numbers and possibilities with the lightning speed that had made him rich. One phone call could restore the program. One signature could bring Miss Santos back. The cost would be negligible, less than he'd spent on his watch, less than he'd drop on wine at dinner tonight. "Maybe," he said, pulling out his phone, "but first you need to get out of this rain." He called his driver with shaking fingers. "Change of plans, Thomas. We're going to Roosevelt Elementary School." Emma scrambled to her feet, clutching her notebook like a treasure. "But it's closed now, Mr. Marcus. It's nighttime." "I know someone who has keys," Marcus said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. "And Emma? Just call me Marcus." Marcus had never noticed how the luxury amenities in his Tesla created a cocoon of privilege. The heated leather seats that adjusted to body temperature, the sound system that cost more than most cars, the climate control that made the outside world feel like a distant planet. Emma sat beside him, her small frame nearly lost in the expansive interior, yet her presence filled the entire space with something he couldn't name. "I've never been in a car this fancy," she whispered, running her fingers along the smooth armrest with reverent wonder. "It's bigger than some of the places I've slept, and it's so quiet, like being inside a cloud." The comment hit Marcus harder than he expected, creating a sharp contrast between his insulated world and her raw reality. "Where do you usually sleep?" "Different places, depending on the night. Sometimes the shelter on Howard Street if there's room, and if the scary man with the knife isn't there. Sometimes the doorway behind Kim's coffee shop. Mrs. Kim leaves me a blanket when it gets really cold, and sometimes leftover pastries." Emma's matter-of-fact tone made the words even more heartbreaking. "The library is good during the day when it's open. Mrs. Patterson, the librarian, pretends not to notice when I stay past closing time doing homework I assign myself." Marcus's throat felt like he'd swallowed broken glass. "How long have you been on the streets?" 2 years, 1 month and 18 days. And Emma's precise answer revealed a child who counted survival in daily increments, marking time like a prisoner. "Since the car accident. Mama and Papa were coming to pick me up from after-school care when it happened. The drunk driver walked away without a scratch. We weren't so lucky." The city lights blurred past the windows as Marcus processed this information, each revelation hitting him like physical blows. 2 years. This brilliant child had been homeless for 2 years while he accumulated millions and complained about the minor inconvenience of helping disadvantaged kids. What about relatives? Grandparents? Extended family? Papa's family is back in Guadalajara. They wanted to take me, but Emma's voice grew smaller, more fragile. "Immigration said it was too complicated because I was born here, but they're not citizens yet. Too much paperwork, too many lawyers. Too expensive for people who work in restaurants and clean houses." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "Mama's parents died in a hurricane when I was 4. The social worker, Miss Chen, she tried really hard to find me a family, but there are so many kids who need homes and not enough people who want to open their hearts." Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Sarah Chen, A social worker he'd met at various charity galas, events he attended purely for business networking and tax write-offs. "I know, Miss Chen," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Emma's eyes widened like he'd just revealed superpowers. "You do. She's really wonderful. She brings me sandwiches sometimes and checks on me when she can, but she has like 100 kids to help, and the system doesn't give her enough money or time for all of them. She cries sometimes when she thinks no one's looking." The Tesla pulled up to Roosevelt Elementary, its brick facade illuminated by harsh streetlights that cast long shadows across empty playgrounds. Marcus had driven past this building hundreds of times without truly seeing it. The chipped paint that spoke of budget constraints, the outdated playground equipment held together with hope and duct tape. The faded poster in the window announcing the closure of the bilingual program. "Mr. Marcus," Emma said quietly, pressing her face against the window, "why did you want to come here? What are you hoping to find?" Marcus studied the building where his cold business decision had shattered dreams and futures, where children like Emma had lost their chance at education because he valued profit margins over human potential. "Because I think I made a terrible mistake, Emma. Maybe the worst mistake of my life." He called the school district's emergency number, using his considerable influence and implied donations to reach Principal Patricia Gonzalez at home. 20 minutes later, she arrived with keys and visible confusion, her expression shifting from annoyance to curiosity when she saw Marcus's expensive car. "Mr. Wellington, I don't understand why you wanted to meet here so late. Is there some kind of emergency with our technology contract?" Marcus gestured to Emma, who had climbed out of the car and stood looking at the school like a pilgrim approaching a holy shrine. "I want to show you someone personally affected by the decision to cut translation services. Someone who lost everything because I was too selfish to see beyond profit margin." Mrs. Gonzalez's expression underwent a complete transformation when she saw Emma, professional distance melting into maternal concern. "Oh, sweetheart, aren't you one of Miss Santos's former students, Emma Rodriguez?" Emma nodded shyly, suddenly looking every bit the 8-year-old she was. "I miss her classes so much. I miss learning new words and writing stories and feeling like I belonged somewhere." As they entered the empty school, their footsteps echoed through hallways lined with student artwork and achievement charts that served as monuments to interrupted dreams. Emma walked with reverence, touching lockers and bulletin boards like sacred artifacts from a lost civilization. "This was my classroom," she said, stopping at a door marked 2B, Miss Santos. Through the window, they could see empty desks arranged in perfect rows, a whiteboard still covered with encouraging messages in both Spanish and English that no one was there to read. Miss Santos used to say that being bilingual made us special, like having 2 keys to unlock different worlds. She said speaking 2 languages meant we could build bridges between different kinds of people, help them understand each other. Emma pressed her face against the glass, her breath fogging the window. She said companies would want to hire people like us someday because we could help everyone communicate better. Marcus felt like he was choking on his own hypocrisy. Mrs. Gonzalez unlocked the classroom door with hands that shook slightly, perhaps sensing the gravity of this unexpected moment. Emma stepped inside like she was entering a cathedral, her movements careful and reverent. She walked directly to her old desk, 3rd row, 2nd seat, and sat down with the careful precision of someone returning to a place of profound significance. "I used to sit right here every morning," she whispered, running her hands over the scarred desktop where someone had carved "Dream Big" in crooked letters. Miss Santos would read us stories in Spanish and English, switching between languages like she was weaving a tapestry of words. Then we'd write our own versions, and she'd help us understand that our thoughts mattered in both languages, that we didn't have to choose between being Mexican and being American. Marcus watched Emma transform before his eyes, from a streetwise survivor back into the eager student she'd once been. Her posture straightened, her eyes brightened with remembered joy, and for a moment The weight of premature adulthood lifted from her thin shoulders like a physical burden being removed. "Mr. Wellington," Mrs. Gonzalez said quietly, her voice carrying years of educator's frustration, "I still don't understand why you're here. Your company was very clear about the costs being prohibitive. Your representative said that accommodating non-English speakers was enabling dependency rather than encouraging integration." Marcus pulled out his phone and called his legal team, despite the late hour, and despite knowing his lawyers charged $800 for emergency consultations. "David, it's Marcus. I need you to draft an amendment to the Roosevelt Elementary contract immediately." "Yes, I know it's almost 8 p.m. This can't wait." Emma looked up from her desk, hope and disbelief warring in her expression like opposing armies fighting for control of her heart. "Full translation services," Marcus continued into the phone, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Textbooks, digital materials, teacher support, interpreter services, everything we originally proposed before we decided to prioritize profit over people. Cost is not a factor. Bill it as a charitable contribution if necessary." Mrs. Gonzalez gasped, her hand flying to cover her mouth. "Mr. Wellington? Are you saying—" "I'm saying Miss Santos gets her job back tomorrow morning if she wants it. The bilingual program is fully restored, effective immediately, and I want you to hire additional support staff, counselors, tutors, anyone who can help kids like Emma succeed." Emma's notebook fell from her hands, pages fluttering like wounded birds across the classroom floor. She scrambled to collect them, tears streaming down her face, each drop carrying 2 years of suppressed grief and sudden, overwhelming hope. "Does this mean I can come back to school?" she asked, her voice breaking like a dam bursting. "Does this mean I can learn again and have friends and belong somewhere?" "It means more than that," Marcus said, kneeling to help gather her scattered stories. As he picked up the pages, he saw himself reflected in Emma's careful words. The sad, rich man who'd forgotten how to smile, the lonely king in his glass tower, the person who'd confused success with significance. One story caught his attention, The Invisible Girl Who Made a Difference. It told of a little girl who had no home and no family, but changed the world anyway, simply by believing that kindness was stronger than money, that love was more powerful than fear, that one person's courage could light up the darkness for everyone. "Emma," he said, holding up the page with hands that trembled slightly, "who taught you to write like this, to see the world with such wisdom?" "Miss Santos started it, but mostly I learned by watching and listening. When you're invisible like me, you see how people really are when they think no one's watching." Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving streaks on her dirt-smudged cheeks. "You see their true hearts." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December weather outside. "What have you seen in people's hearts?" Emma considered this seriously, her young face reflecting the weight of premature experience. "I've seen people step over hungry kids to get to expensive restaurants, like poverty was contagious. I've seen men in $1,000 suits argue about money, while families with babies lose their homes on the same street. I've seen people throw away enough food to feed me for a week because it wasn't perfectly fresh." She paused, then continued with remarkable balance. "But I've also seen Mrs. Kim leave me food when her own business was struggling. I've seen Miss Chen work until midnight trying to help kids like me, even though the system pays her almost nothing. I've seen teachers spend their own money on supplies because they love their students more than their budgets." Emma looked directly at Marcus with those penetrating brown eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "And tonight I saw a very rich man realize that making money and making a difference don't have to be different things. I saw someone remember that having power means having responsibility to help people who don't have power." Mrs. Gonzalez was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she pressed her hands to her mouth. "Mr. Wellington, this is an absolute miracle. Do you understand what this means for our community?" But Marcus was staring at Emma, understanding dawning like sunrise after the longest night of his life. "You wrote that story about the sad rich man before you ever spoke to me, didn't you?" Emma nodded solemnly. I've been watching you for months, hoping someday you'd see me. Not because I wanted your money, but because I thought maybe if someone as powerful as you remembered what it felt like to be lonely and scared, you might help other people feel less alone too. The classroom fell silent, except for the distant hum of the heating system struggling against the December cold, and the soft patter of rain against windows that reflected their small group like a painting of hope being born. Marcus stared at this 8-year-old girl who had systematically dismantled every wall he'd built around his heart over the past 13 years. Emma hadn't manipulated him or tried to guilt him into charity. She hadn't demanded anything or played victim. Instead, she'd simply existed with such authentic grace that her very presence had forced him to confront the man he'd become versus the person he'd once dreamed of being. "Emma," he said slowly, his voice catching on words that felt foreign on his tongue. "You said there aren't enough families for all the kids who need them." She nodded carefully, suddenly wary, as if sensing that something monumental was shifting in the air around them. "What if?" Marcus's voice broke completely, the words carrying the weight of a decision that would change everything. What if there was one more family available? What if there was someone who had everything material but realized he had nothing that actually mattered? Mrs. Gonzalez and Emma both froze, the magnitude of his suggestion settling over the classroom like dawn breaking after an endless night. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and terror and hope. "Mr. Wellington," Mrs. Gonzalez whispered, her educator's instincts warring with her heart, "are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting that I have a 5-bedroom penthouse with nobody to share it with except my own regrets. I'm suggesting that Emma is the wisest, most courageous person I've met in my entire adult life, regardless of age. And I'm suggesting that maybe we both need someone to care about, someone to remind us what really matters in this world." Emma's eyes filled with tears again, but these were different. Not tears of sadness or desperate hope, but of recognition, as if she'd been waiting her entire short life for this moment without knowing it. "Would you really want me?" she asked in a voice so small it was barely audible. "Even though I'm not your real daughter? Even though I'm just a homeless kid with nothing to offer except stories and hope?" Marcus knelt in front of her desk, meeting her at eye level, seeing in her face the child he'd once been before the world taught him to be hard. "Emma, my biological father walked out on me when I was 15. He taught me that love was conditional, that worth was measured in bank accounts, that caring about people was weakness disguised as stupidity." He reached out tentatively and touched her small hand, marveling at how something so fragile could be so strong. "In one evening you've taught me more about real strength and actual value than he did in 15 years. But I don't have anything to give you," Emma protested, her voice breaking with the weight of a lifetime of being unwanted. "I don't have money or fancy clothes or connections or anything that successful people need." "You have stories that can change hearts," Marcus interrupted, his own voice thick with emotion. "You have wisdom that comes from surviving what would break most adults. You have the ability to see people's souls, even when they've forgotten they have them. You have the kind of courage that lets you hope for better tomorrows, even when today seems impossibly dark." He paused, then continued with growing certainty. "And you have something I lost years ago and desperately need back. You remember how to love without calculating the return on investment." Emma slipped from her chair and approached Marcus cautiously, like a wild bird testing whether it was safe to trust a human hand. "Would I really be able to go to school again, every day, every single day? You'd have your own room, with a desk for writing and shelves for all the books you could ever want to read. You'd have clothes that fit and food whenever you're hungry and people who think you're precious just because you exist. Could I keep writing stories? I'd be disappointed if you stopped. Someone needs to remind me what really matters when I inevitably forget and start counting money instead of blessings." Emma reached out with one small finger and touched Marcus's face, tracing the lines of stress and loneliness etched around his eyes like a map of wasted years. "You're not sad anymore, are you?" Daddy, Marcus caught her hand and held it gently, feeling tears he hadn't shed since childhood threatening to fall. "No, Emma. For the first time in 13 years, I'm not sad." Mrs. Gonzalez wiped her eyes with a tissue, her educator's heart recognizing the miracle unfolding before her. "Mr. Wellington, the adoption process can be complex, especially given Emma's unique situation and the previous failed placements. But I know Sarah Chen very well. With your resources and Emma's clear attachment to you already, with character witnesses and proper evaluation." "Whatever it takes," Marcus said with the same fierce determination he'd once reserved for hostile takeovers. "However long it takes, whatever it costs, whoever I need to convince. Emma is worth more than everything else I own combined." Emma threw her arms around Marcus's neck with the desperate intensity of a child who'd learned not to hope too hard, but couldn't help herself anyway. Her small body shook with years of suppressed longing finally finding expression. "Does this mean I get to keep you too?" she whispered against his shoulder, her voice muffled but clear. "Does this mean I finally get to have a family again?" Marcus felt 28 years of carefully constructed emotional armor crumble into dust, taking with it the cold businessman who'd walked into this school and leaving behind someone he'd forgotten he could be, someone capable of love. "Yes, Emma," he whispered back, his voice breaking with joy instead of pain for the first time in memory. "We get to keep each other. We get to be a family." Dajin, as they held each other in the empty classroom, surrounded by the ghosts of abandoned dreams now suddenly resurrected, Marcus realized that the most profitable transaction of his entire life had cost him nothing but pride and given him everything that actually mattered: purpose, love, and a reason to be better than he'd ever thought possible. Outside, the December rain had stopped, and the first stars were visible through the classroom windows, shining down on a man who'd just discovered that the greatest fortune wasn't the one he'd built, but the one he'd found in the heart of a little girl who'd been invisible to everyone else. 3 weeks had passed since that transformative December evening at Roosevelt Elementary, and Marcus's penthouse had undergone a revolution that no amount of money could have purchased. Where once sterile minimalism had reigned supreme, Emma's presence had brought chaos and color, art supplies scattered across his imported marble counters, children's books creating precarious towers beside first-edition business journals, and a small desk positioned strategically near the floor-to-ceiling windows, where she could write stories while watching the city wake up each morning. Sarah Chen sat across from Marcus in his home office, her social worker's instincts cataloguing every detail of their interaction. Emma was at her first day back at Roosevelt Elementary. Miss Santos had returned with tears of joy and a renewed sense of purpose that reminded everyone why they'd become educators in the first place. "The preliminary evaluation has been overwhelmingly positive," Sarah said, reviewing her notes with professional thoroughness. "Emma's psychological assessment shows remarkable resilience and genuine attachment. Dr. Martinez noted that she speaks about you with a combination of gratitude and protective affection that's quite rare in emergency placements." Marcus felt his throat tighten. Protective affection. She told the psychologist that she worries about you working too much, that someone needs to make sure you remember to eat lunch and notice beautiful sunsets. Sarah smiled. When asked about her biggest fear, she said it wasn't losing her new home. It was disappointing you somehow and making you regret your decision. The irony hit Marcus like a physical blow. Here was a child who'd lost everything, yet her primary concern was his well-being. "I never want her to feel that pressure." "Which is exactly why this placement is working," Sarah continued. "Your transformation has been documented by multiple witnesses. Jennifer, your assistant, mentioned that you've implemented company-wide policy changes, mandatory employee mental health benefits, a new diversity and inclusion program, and you've personally funded full college scholarships for 25 underprivileged students." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. He'd never discussed these changes with anyone. viewing them as private decisions rather than public relations opportunities. Emma made me realize that success without conscience is just sophisticated selfishness. There is one complication we need to discuss, Sarah said, her tone growing serious. Emma's uncle, Roberto Rodriguez, has been located. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Her uncle? Roberto is Emma's father's younger brother. He's been working construction in Texas, sending money back to family in Mexico. He had no idea about the accident or Emma's situation until a cousin saw a news story about your adoption proceedings and contacted him. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Marcus gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles white. What does he want? He wants to meet Emma. He says family should take care of family, that it's his responsibility as her father's brother. Sarah's expression was carefully neutral, but Marcus could read the concern in her eyes. Legally, he has rights. Blood relatives typically take precedence in custody decisions, especially when they can provide stable homes. Marcus felt like he was drowning in panic. In 3 weeks, Emma had become the center of his universe, the reason he woke up excited about each day, instead of dreading another cycle of empty achievement. The thought of losing her felt like contemplating his own death. Has Emma been told? Not yet. I wanted to speak with you first. Sarah leaned forward. Marcus, I need you to understand that Emma's best interests have to come first, regardless of our personal feelings. Of course, Marcus said automatically, though every fiber of his being screamed in rebellion. When does he want to meet her? This weekend. He's driving up from Houston. Sarah gathered her papers. I know this is terrifying, but remember, Emma has a voice in this decision too. She's not a piece of property to be claimed. She's a person with feelings and preferences that courts are required to consider. After Sarah left, Marcus stood at his windows, looking out at the city that had once represented conquest and now felt like a potential prison. How could he explain to an 8-year-old that the family she'd just found might be taken away by biology and legal precedent? His phone rang. Mr. Marcus? Emma's voice carried the excitement of a child experiencing joy for the first time in years. Miss Santos says I'm reading at a 6th grade level, and I made a friend named Sophia who likes to write stories too. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Marcus managed, his voice steady despite the chaos in his chest. Are you okay? You sound sad. Even over the phone, Emma's intuition was uncanny. I'm fine, just thinking about some business things. Remember what I told you about business and hearts, Emma said, with the wisdom that never failed to astound him. Sometimes the most important decisions can't be made with spreadsheets. After they hung up, Marcus stood in the silence of his penthouse, understanding, for the first time in his life, what it meant to have something worth fighting for, and what it felt like to face the possibility of losing it to forces beyond his control. Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp December morning that made San Francisco look like a postcard. Marcus had barely slept, his mind cycling through worst-case scenarios and legal strategies. Emma had sensed his tension without understanding its source, spending Friday evening curled against him on the couch, reading stories aloud in both Spanish and English, a skill that reminded him daily of the program he'd almost destroyed through his own selfishness. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 a.m. Marcus opened it to find Sarah Chen, accompanied by a man who shared Emma's dark eyes and determined chin. Roberto Rodriguez was younger than Marcus had expected, perhaps 35, with calloused hands that spoke of honest labor and shoulders bowed by responsibility rather than age. Mr. Wellington, Roberto said in accented English, extending his hand with careful dignity. Thank you for meeting with me. I know this is complicated. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, having heard unfamiliar voices. She froze when she saw Roberto, her notebook clutched against her chest like armor. Emma, Sarah said gently, this is your Uncle Roberto, your papa's younger brother. Emma descended the stairs slowly, studying Roberto with the careful assessment of a child who'd learned that adults could disappear without warning. You look like Papa, she said quietly. Same eyes, same nose. Roberto's composure cracked, tears filling his eyes as he knelt to Emma's level. "Mija, I am so sorry. I didn't know about the accident. If I had known," his voice broke, "your papa was my best friend. I should have protected you." "Where were you?" Emma asked, with devastating directness. "Working in Texas, sending money to Abuela in Mexico, no phone, no internet where I was working. When Cousin Maria called last week about seeing you on the news." Roberto wiped his eyes. "I drove straight here, 2 days without stopping." Marcus watched this reunion with his heart breaking in real time. He could see the family resemblance, could see Emma's features reflected in Roberto's face like a genetic echo. This man had every right to claim her, and every reason to resent the wealthy stranger who'd stepped into his family's tragedy. "Tell me about Papa when he was little," Emma said, settling on the couch with careful distance between herself and Roberto. Roberto's face transformed with memory and love. "Your papa was always the smart one, always reading, always dreaming of bringing the family to America for better opportunities. He taught me English by making me practice every night after work." Roberto smiled through his tears. "He used to say that education was the only inheritance he could give his children that no one could steal." Emma nodded solemnly. "He told me the same thing. He said words were more valuable than gold because they could open any door." "That sounds like him." Roberto glanced around the luxurious penthouse, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Wellington, I want to thank you for taking care of Emma. I can see she is healthy and happy." "Emma has been the greatest gift of my life," Marcus said carefully. "She's changed everything about who I am and what I believe matters." "I believe that," Roberto said, surprising him. "But she is my blood, my family's responsibility. In our culture, family takes care of family. It is a matter of honor." Emma looked between the two men, her young mind clearly working through implications that shouldn't burden any child. "Uncle Roberto, where would I live if I came with you?" "I have a small apartment in Houston. Nothing fancy like this, but clean and safe. There's a good school nearby with other Mexican-American kids. You could learn about your heritage, speak Spanish every day, know where you come from." "And Mr. Marcus?" Emma's voice was barely audible. Roberto's expression softened. "Mr. Marcus would always be welcome to visit. I'm not trying to erase what he's done for you, Mija. But you're a Rodriguez. That means something." Emma stood abruptly, clutching her notebook. "I need to think. Is that okay? Can I go to my room and think?" Both men nodded, watching her climb the stairs with the weight of an impossible decision on her small shoulders. "She's very mature for 8, Roberto observed. "Too mature," Marcus replied. "She's had to make adult decisions her entire life. I was hoping to change that." They sat in uncomfortable silence, two men who wanted the same thing, Emma's happiness, but couldn't agree on how to achieve it. "Mr. Wellington," Roberto said finally, "I don't hate you. I'm grateful you saved her when I couldn't. But I need you to understand. I've been sending money to support my family since I was 15. When my brother died, I became responsible for his daughter. It's not just about what I want. It's about what's right." Marcus nodded, understanding honor in a way he'd never considered before. "And I need you to understand that Emma isn't just some charity case to me. She's become my daughter in every way that matters. The thought of losing her feels like dying." Roberto studied Marcus's face, seeing pain that money couldn't heal. "You really love her, more than I knew I was capable of loving anyone." From upstairs, they heard Emma's voice calling softly, "Uncle Roberto, Mr. Marcus, can you both come here? I want to show you something." They found Emma sitting at her small desk, surrounded by open notebooks filled with stories and drawings. She looked up at them with eyes that held wisdom far beyond her years. "I wrote something for both of you," she said. "Will you listen?" Emma cleared her throat and began reading from a page covered in her careful handwriting, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "Once upon a time, there was a little girl who lost her first family in a terrible accident. She was very sad and scared and had to learn how to be brave when everything felt broken. For a long time, she lived in the cold and dark, thinking maybe she was meant to be alone forever. Marcus and Roberto sat on either side of her bed, both men hanging on every word. Then one day, she met a man who had forgotten how to love because he was scared of being hurt again. He had everything money could buy, but nothing his heart really needed. When they found each other, something magical happened. They remembered that families aren't just about blood or birth certificates. They're about people who choose to love each other even when it's scary. Emma turned the page, her voice growing stronger. But then the little girl's uncle found her, and he loved her too, because she reminded him of his brother who had gone to heaven. The uncle had honor and tradition and wanted to do right by his family. He offered her a different kind of love, the love of knowing where she came from and who her people were. She looked up at both men, tears in her eyes but determination in her voice. The little girl realized she didn't have to choose between two different kinds of love. She could have both if everyone was brave enough to create a new kind of family, one built on choice and care, instead of just blood or just convenience. Roberto and Marcus exchanged glances, beginning to understand where Emma's wisdom was leading them. "Uncle Roberto," Emma said, turning to face him directly, "I want to know about Papa and our family in Mexico. I want to learn the songs Abuela sang and the stories about our ancestors. I want to speak Spanish without feeling ashamed and understand why Papa came to America and what he dreamed for me." Roberto's face lit up with hope and pride. "But," Emma continued, holding up her hand, "Mr. Marcus is my Papa now too. He chose me when I was invisible to everyone else. He changed his whole life to make room for me. He brought Miss Santos back and helped my school and became a different person because loving me made him better." She stood up, looking between them with 8-year-old seriousness. "I don't want to choose. I want Uncle Roberto to be my family, and I want Mr. Marcus to be my Papa. Can't we all be a family together?" The room fell silent except for the sound of two grown men trying not to cry. Roberto spoke first, his voice thick with emotion. "Mija, what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe Uncle Roberto could move to San Francisco. Maybe Mr. Marcus could help you find a good job here, and you could live nearby, so I could see you all the time. Maybe we could have Sunday dinners together and you could teach me about our traditions, while Mr. Marcus helps me with school and writing." Marcus felt his heart expanding in ways he hadn't known were possible. "Emma, you're talking about creating something that doesn't really exist in law or society. Then maybe we create something new," Emma said, with the confidence of a child who hadn't yet learned that some things were impossible. "Maybe we show people that love is bigger than rules." Roberto stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city that could become his new home. "It would mean leaving everything I know in Texas, starting over. It would mean gaining a family," Emma said quietly. "And Mr. Marcus could help with that, couldn't you?" Marcus looked at this remarkable child who was orchestrating a solution that honored everyone's hearts. "Roberto, I run a tech company that's always looking for skilled construction managers for our new facilities. The pay would be significantly better than what you're making in Texas." Roberto turned around slowly. "You would do that? For someone who came here to take away the most important thing in your life?" "No," Marcus said, understanding flooding through him like sunrise. "I do that for someone who loves Emma as much as I do. Someone who could give her something I never could, a connection to her heritage and her father's memory." Emma clapped her hands together. "So we can try? We can all be a family together?" Roberto looked at Marcus, and something passed between them, an understanding that transcended competition and entered the realm of shared purpose. "There would have to be legal arrangements," Roberto said slowly. "Shared custody, clear boundaries, respect for both relationships." "I have excellent lawyers," Marcus replied. "They can structure whatever we need to make this work legally and emotionally." Emma launched herself at both men, wrapping her arms around them in a three-way hug that felt like coming home. "This is how families should be," she said, her voice muffled against their shoulders. "Not fighting over who owns who, but choosing to love each other, even when it's complicated." As they held each other in that sunlit room, filled with Emma's stories and dreams, Marcus realized that his greatest business negotiation had just been conducted by an 8-year-old girl who understood partnership better than any Harvard MBA. She hadn't chosen sides. She'd expanded the definition of family itself. But even as joy filled his heart, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered a question that would soon demand an answer. Was this beautiful solution too good to last? Or were there still secrets waiting to emerge from the shadows of the past? 2 months later, the unconventional family arrangement was thriving beyond anyone's expectations. Roberto had moved into a beautiful apartment, 6 blocks from Marcus's penthouse, close enough for daily involvement, but far enough to maintain healthy boundaries. Marcus's company had hired him as a construction coordinator for their new campus expansion, where his bilingual skills and work ethic quickly earned respect from colleagues and supervisors alike. Emma flourished under the dual attention, her Spanish improving rapidly under Roberto's patient tutoring, while her English writing skills soared under Marcus's encouragement. She kept detailed journals about her dual heritage, creating stories that bridged 2 cultures with the natural ease of a child who saw connection where adults often saw division. But on this particular Tuesday evening, as they gathered for their weekly family dinner at Marcus's penthouse, the careful equilibrium they'd built was about to face its greatest test. Roberto arrived carrying a manila envelope, his usually cheerful demeanor replaced by visible anxiety. Emma was setting the table with characteristic precision, chattering about her day at school, when she noticed her uncle's serious expression. "Tio Roberto, what's wrong? You look like when Papa used to get bills he couldn't pay." "Moo." Roberto and Marcus exchanged glances heavy with unspoken communication. Over the past 2 months, they'd developed a partnership based on Emma's best interests, but Roberto's news threatened to shatter everything they'd built. "Emma, mija, we need to talk about something important," Roberto said. Settling into his chair with the envelope clutched in his hands, Marcus felt ice forming in his stomach. "What is it?" Roberto opened the envelope and pulled out official-looking documents bearing the seal of the Mexican consulate. "I received these yesterday. They're from our family lawyer in Guadalajara." Emma's eyes widened. "About Abuela?" "No, sweetheart. About you." Roberto's voice was gentle, but firm. "Your grandmother has been fighting the Mexican courts for 2 years, trying to gain legal guardianship. She never gave up believing she could bring you home to live with your father's family." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was about to consume everything they'd built. Marcus felt his world tilting. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that Abuela has won her case. The Mexican courts have ruled that Emma should be with her blood family in Mexico, where she can grow up surrounded by relatives who knew and loved her parents." Roberto's hands shook as he held the papers. "They're ordering me to bring her back within 30 days. Emma's face went white. "But I don't want to leave. I just found my family here." "It's not about what any of us want, mija," Roberto said, tears beginning to form in his eyes. "It's about Mexican law and family honor and doing what our ancestors would expect." Marcus stood abruptly, pacing to the windows that overlooked the city where he'd built his empire and found his heart. "There has to be something we can do. Appeals, international custody law, diplomatic channels. I've already consulted with 3 different lawyers," Roberto interrupted, "because Emma was born in the United States. It's complicated, but because both her parents were Mexican citizens and she has extensive family in Mexico actively seeking custody. The International Family Court tends to favor keeping children with their cultural heritage." Emma clutched her notebook to her chest, the same gesture Marcus had first seen that night in the rain. "Tio Roberto, do you want me to go to Mexico?" The question hit Roberto like a physical blow. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. "Part of me wants to honor our family's wishes and take you home where you belong, but another part of me sees how happy you are here, how much you've grown, how much Mr. Marcus loves you." "And which part is winning?" Emma asked with devastating directness. Roberto looked up. his face streaked with tears. The part that thinks an 8-year-old shouldn't have to keep making impossible choices about where she belongs. Marcus returned to the table, his mind racing through possibilities and resources. What if we fight it? What if we take it to the US? Courts and argue that Emma's best interests are served by staying here? We could try, Roberto said, but international family law is complex, and the Mexican side has a strong case. Emma would be with blood relatives who've been trying to claim her since the accident. They can provide cultural continuity and extended family support. Emma stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. Stop talking about me like I'm not here. Stop acting like I'm a package you need to ship to the right address. Both men fell silent, chastened by the fury in her voice. I'm 8 years old, not 2, Emma continued, her voice rising with frustration and pain. I have thoughts and feelings and opinions about my own life. Doesn't anyone care what I actually want? Of course we do, Marcus said quickly. But sometimes the law is made by adults who think they know what's best for kids without asking the kids. Emma's eyes blazed with intelligence and anger. Well, I'm tired of being decided for. I'm tired of people who love me fighting over who gets to keep me. She stormed toward the stairs, then turned back with tears streaming down her face. You know what I want? I want my parents back. I want to not be the reason good people hurt each other. I want to stop being the prize in some contest I never asked to enter. With that, she ran upstairs, leaving both men staring after her in shocked silence. Roberto was the first to speak. She's right. We're doing exactly what we swore we wouldn't do, treating her like property instead of a person. Marcus nodded slowly, his heart breaking for the impossible position they'd put Emma in. What do we do? I don't know, Roberto admitted. But I think we need to start by asking Emma what she really wants, not what we think she should want. As they sat in the wreckage of their careful family arrangement, both men realized that their greatest challenge wasn't legal or cultural. It was learning to love Emma enough to put her voice above their own fears of losing her. Upstairs, Emma sat at her desk, writing furiously, tears smearing the ink as she poured her heart onto paper. Marcus and Roberto found her an hour later, surrounded by crumpled pages and wearing the exhausted expression of someone who'd wrestled with angels and lost. Emma, Marcus said softly, knocking on her open door. Can we come in? She nodded without looking up from her writing. I'm trying to figure out how to fix this, but every solution I think of hurts someone I love. Roberto sat on her bed while Marcus took the chair beside her desk. What are you writing, mija? A letter to Abuela, Emma said, finally looking up with red-rimmed eyes. I want to explain why I can't come to Mexico right now, but I don't know how to say it without sounding like I don't love my papa's family. Marcus felt his throat constrict. Emma, you don't have to fix this. It's not your responsibility. Yes, it is, Emma said with heartbreaking maturity. I'm the person everyone's fighting about. I'm the one who has to live with whatever decision gets made. That makes it my responsibility to at least try to help everyone understand. As she picked up a sheet of paper covered in careful handwriting, Can I read you what I wrote to Abuela? Both men nodded, sensing they were about to hear something profound. Emma cleared her throat and began, Dear Abuela, I know you love me and want me to come live with you in Mexico because that's where Papa grew up and where our family history lives. I know you've been fighting for 2 years to bring me home, and that shows how much you care about me. She paused, wiping her eyes before continuing. But I need you to understand that I already found a home here with people who chose to love me when I had nothing. Tio Roberto came to take care of me because it was his duty, but he stayed because he learned to love me as I am now, not just as his brother's daughter. And Mr. Marcus became my papa, not because he had to, but because we healed each other's broken hearts. Roberto reached over and squeezed Emma's shoulder encouragingly. I want to know about our family and our traditions, Emma continued reading. I want to speak Spanish perfectly and learn the songs Papa sang to me. But I also want to stay in school with Miss Santos and keep writing stories and live with the people who proved that love doesn't have to be about blood or obligation. She looked up at both men. Then I wrote about a compromise. What kind of compromise? Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. I asked Abuela if I could spend summers in Mexico with the family, learning about where I come from, but live here during the school year with you and Tio Roberto. Emma's voice grew stronger as she explained her reasoning. That way, I get both families, both cultures, both languages. I become a bridge between two worlds instead of having to choose just one. Roberto and Marcus exchanged glances, both recognizing the wisdom in her solution, but understanding the complexities it would create. Emma, Roberto said gently, international arrangements like that are very complicated legally. And it would mean being separated from both families for months at a time. I've been separated from everyone I love for 2 years, Emma replied with devastating logic. At least this way, the separations would be temporary, and I'd always know I was coming back to people who wanted me. Marcus pulled out his phone. I'm calling David Martinez, my lawyer who specializes in international family law. If there's a way to make this work legally, he'll find it. You'd really support this arrangement? Roberto asked, surprise evident in his voice. Even though it means losing Emma for months every year? Marcus looked at Emma, seeing not the homeless child he'd found in the rain, but the wise, compassionate young woman she was becoming. I'd support whatever makes Emma happiest, even if it breaks my heart. That's what real love means, wanting someone's joy more than your own comfort. Emma threw her arms around Marcus's neck. This is why you're my papa, not because of papers or laws, but because you love me enough to let me be myself. She turned to Roberto. And Tio, will you help me explain this to Abuela? Will you help her understand that I'm not rejecting our family, just expanding it? Roberto nodded, tears in his eyes. I'll call her tonight. I'll explain that you want to honor both families, not choose between them. Dumb. As they sat together in Emma's room, surrounded by her notebooks and dreams, Marcus realized that the three of them had just accomplished something remarkable. They'd put a child's needs above their own fears and created space for a solution that honored everyone's love. But even as hope bloomed in his chest, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that their battle was far from over. International family law was notoriously unpredictable, and Emma's grandmother had resources and determination that shouldn't be underestimated. Still, as he looked at Emma's face, bright with possibility instead of darkened by despair, Marcus felt something he'd never experienced in any business negotiation, the profound satisfaction of fighting for something more important than victory. He was fighting for love itself, in all its complicated, beautiful, impossible forms. The phone in his hand buzzed with a text from his lawyer. Available for emergency consultation tonight. International custody cases are my specialty. Don't lose hope. For the first time in weeks, Marcus allowed himself to believe that sometimes, just sometimes, the right thing and the legal thing could be the same thing, especially when guided by the wisdom of a remarkable 8-year-old girl who understood family better than any court could ever define it. 6 months later, Emma Rodriguez Wellington stood in the departure lounge of San Francisco International Airport, her dual surname passport clutched in one hand and her ever-present notebook in the other. At 9 years old, she'd celebrated her birthday with both families in a joyous fusion of Mexican traditions and American festivities. She was about to embark on her first summer in Guadalajara with Abuela Carmen and the extended Rodriguez family. The legal battle had been epic and exhausting, involving 3 countries, family courts, international children's rights advocates, and enough legal paperwork to fill several file cabinets. But Emma's heartfelt letter to her grandmother, translated and delivered by Roberto, had accomplished what lawyers alone never could. It had opened Abuela Carmen's heart to the possibility that love could expand rather than divide. Marcus knelt in front of Emma, adjusting her small backpack with hands that trembled slightly. You have your journal for writing about your adventures. Do you already started 3 stories about flying on airplanes? Emma grinned, her excitement barely contained. And Tio Roberto taught me some Mexican games to play with my cousins. Roberto stood nearby with their boarding passes, his own emotions carefully controlled. He would accompany Emma for the first week, helping her settle in and serving as a bridge between her American life and her Mexican heritage. Remember, mija, Roberto said, if you get homesick or scared or anything doesn't feel right, we're just a phone call away. Mr. Marcus and I will be on the next plane if you need us. Emma nodded solemnly, then broke into the radiant smile that had first captured Marcus's heart. I remember, but I won't be scared because I finally understand something important. What's that, sweetheart? Marcus asked, his voice husky with impending separation. Family isn't a place you have to choose, Emma said with the wisdom that continued to astound every adult in her orbit. Family is love that follows you wherever you go. I'm taking both my families with me in my heart, and that means I'm never really leaving anyone behind. She pulled out her notebook and showed them a drawing she'd made, a heart divided not by lines that separated, but by bridges that connected. On one side, she'd drawn Marcus in his business suit, Roberto in his work clothes, and Miss Santos in her classroom. On the other side, she'd carefully sketched Abuela Carmen, cousins she'd only seen in photographs, and the Mexican home where her father had grown up. See? Emma pointed to the bridges between the 2 sides. That's me. I'm the connection that makes one big family instead of 2 separate ones. Marcus felt tears he'd stopped trying to hide sliding down his cheeks. You're the smartest person I know, Emma Rodriguez Wellington. I learned it from you, Emma replied, standing on her tiptoes to hug him fiercely. You taught me that love makes people braver and better. That's what I'm going to teach my cousins in Mexico, that having family in America doesn't make me less Mexican, it just makes me luckier. The boarding announcement echoed through the terminal, calling for families with small children. Roberto shouldered his bag and extended his hand to Emma. Ready for our adventure, mija? Emma took his hand, then reached back to squeeze Marcus's fingers one more time. I love you, Papa Marcus. I'll write you a story every single day. I love you too, my brilliant daughter, more than all the money in all the banks in all the world. Middle. As Emma and Roberto walked toward the gate, Marcus watched his heart walking away in the form of a remarkable little girl who taught him that the greatest wealth wasn't what you accumulated, but what you shared. She turned back twice to wave, her smile bright enough to light up the terminal. Marcus stood there long after their plane had taxied away, his phone already buzzing with text messages from colleagues about urgent business matters. But for the first time in his adult life, the messages could wait. He had something more important to do. He needed to go home and prepare for Emma's return in August, when she would come back filled with new stories, new Spanish words, and an even richer understanding of where she came from and where she belonged. As he walked through the airport, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him here. 9 months ago, he'd been a lonely millionaire who measured success in profit margins and stock prices. Tonight, he was a father whose greatest achievement was a 9-year-old girl's happiness, whose most valuable possession was a collection of handwritten stories about hope and love and families that transcended every boundary society tried to impose. His phone rang. The caller ID showed Emma's number. She must have already landed and made it through customs. Papa Marcus! Emma's voice bubbled with excitement and exhaustion. I'm here. Abuela is crying happy tears, and all my cousins want to hear about American schools, and Tio Roberto says the house smells just like when Papa was little. That's wonderful. Sweetheart, are you happy? I'm perfect, Emma said, and Marcus could hear the truth in her voice. Because I know where I come from now, and I know where I'm going back to, and both places are filled with people who love me exactly as I am. After they hung up, Marcus stood in the airport parking garage beside his Tesla, looking up at the stars that connected San Francisco to Guadalajara, to every place love had ever built a bridge between hearts. He thought about the homeless little girl who'd been invisible to the world until she made herself seen through courage and wisdom. He thought about the cold businessman who'd been slowly dying inside his expensive fortress until love saved him from his own success. And he smiled, really smiled, for the first time in 13 years, understanding that the greatest fortune he'd ever earn was the trust of a child who'd looked past his money to see his soul, and then loved both enough to transform them into something beautiful. The stars shone down on a man who'd learned that the most profitable investment was love, that the highest return came from giving rather than taking, and that sometimes the most important business deal was negotiated not in boardrooms, but in the heart of a little girl who understood that family wasn't about ownership. It was about belonging. Marcus drove home to a penthouse that was no longer empty, because it was filled with the promise of return, the memory of laughter, and the certainty that love, once given freely, creates wealth that can never be lost or stolen or diminished. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Writing my first Mexican story tonight. It's about a rich man who became truly wealthy when he learned the difference between having everything and having enough. Love you, Papa. See you in August. Marcus Wellington." Father and family man drove through the San Francisco night toward home, toward stories, toward a future brighter than any profit projection had ever promised. A future written by a wise little girl who'd taught him that the best investments pay dividends in love. And the greatest return on that investment was the privilege of watching her fly.